Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. My name is Bella and we're here for another week, which is very exciting because this episode feels like an important one to record. I need to remember to hold this here, sometimes I forget. But first things first, we're back on the red chair. My sister says it looks like I'm on the Graham Norton show and now I can't unsee it, but we're just going to all have to get over that because this is the best podcasting setup that I think I have in this flat. I have limited room to conduct this in my room, and so I feel like this is the best setup. I do miss my bedroom at home. I feel like that had way better lighting, and this feels a lot more, but we've got to make do. I'm back in Manchester, people, and if you didn't already know, I had a job interview. But anyway, we're going to come on to that in the content part of this week's podcast because it's actually very connected, and I didn't realize it was connected, but it is connected. My room right now, it's so messy that I don't think you can quite comprehend it. But it's because whenever I do the podcast, I have to literally just move everything out of the sides of these 4 camera walls. And so I've got a little bit of tidying up to do. But anyway, I'm back in Manchester and I've had such a lovely week back here. On Saturday, we went for a big walk in the Peak District. Beautiful. 4 hours of hiking. 4 hours. I tracked it as hike on my Apple Watch, not walk, because felt serious. Felt like a serious walk we were doing. And then on Tuesday, what did I do? Tuesday, I did podcasty stuff. Wednesday, I did so much interview prep. Thursday, I had the interview and did nothing. When I have events in the day, like at 2 p.m., like a meeting at 2 p.m., I can't do anything beforehand apart from the gym. Like that is all I can manage. Like, because all I can think about is the thing that's coming. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of You've Got Mail. My name is Bella and we're here for another week, which is very exciting because I have an update. I'm just going to get comfortable actually. I had a job interview, people. I had a job interview on Thursday. You know this if you follow me on Instagram, which if you don't already, give me a little follow. We get to stay in touch more. Had a job interview. I think it went well. I don't know. I find out in 2 weeks, so you'll know as soon as I know, but it's okay. We're not going to overthink it. I'm really trying to manifest it happening, but not get too attached because I am scared that if I don't get it, I'll be really, really sad. So we're just not going to. It's fine. I feel confident about it, but I tried my best, and that's the main thing. That's always the main thing. And so, feeling all right about that. Being back in Manchester is really nice. It's nice to be able to have a little bit of routine and be able to go to the gym and be able to see my boyfriend. And, it's nice to be back also around all my stuff. Living out of a suitcase, not so much fun. Although I do miss being able to just go on a walk and it'd be really pretty. Because I feel like when I had nothing to do, then that would feel like something to do. Whereas here, walking around the city, it just doesn't hit the same. It really doesn't hit the same. But, it's all good. Today I've had a really lovely day though. But a very Saturday, Friday. Woke up, went to the gym, went to Fig and Sparrow, which is my favourite coffee shop in Manchester. And I think it's my favourite coffee shop because me and Louis have always, when we were long distance, that was the coffee shop we always used to go to. So going back now just feels like, a full circle moment. It's nice. And we had this Lotus Biscoff cookie, which was insane. It was delicious. Had a caramel scent at 10 out of 10. Couldn't recommend more if I tried. And so, a great day all round. A great day all round. But let's move on to the content. Oh, sorry about that. But let's discuss the content of this week's podcast episode because it's something I didn't really realize I was going to talk about until I was thinking about what to talk about 10 minutes before I knew I had to record, and I realized this is something that I'm finding a little bit tricky, and I don't think we talk about it. And I think it's the relationship you have with spending time on your own, and the fact that that relationship and the way you navigate spending time on your own can change, and how sometimes it can bring you a lot of comfort, and then flip times it can make you feel really lonely, and being able to spend time on your own is so important, but it's something I'm really struggling with at the moment. And I think it's because I'm spending more time on my own than I have in ages. And I think especially this week, last week I was obviously at home. This week I am spending a lot more time on my own, and it's making me question a lot of things about myself, about whether I actually enjoy my own company, about all of these things which come about when you've got too much time to think. And I do kind of feel like maybe I have just a little bit too much time to think about everything at the moment. But that then made me think that I can't be the only one who feels like this, who feels like their relationship with spending time on their own ebbs and flows. Because when I was in London, I used to find it so easy. I really, really didn't mind. And I don't have an issue with going out and doing things on my own. It's not so much that, but sometimes I find myself when I'm, in the flat on my own, like today, I just compare myself to everyone around me, and I think, why don't I have that, or why am I not doing that, and am I not doing enough, and why don't I have friends to do that with? And it's not so much that I don't enjoy my own company, but that my own company doesn't feel enough sometimes. And that's something that has really come up a lot in this period where I don't have a job, because I am spending so much more time on my own. And I think when you're working, so much of your, like, your social life is filled by interacting with your colleagues, interacting with the people around you, and you don't need a lot of human interaction, but you do need some that's not just you one on one with someone. And the tricky thing I find is, like, I don't like phone calls and everything. They're quite, you kind of just want like an easy like chat, like things like that. And so phone calls, I feel like I'm not motivated. Like, I'm a terrible phone caller sometimes. I just don't love it. I just get a bit distracted sometimes. It's just, and so I guess I have been spending a lot more time on my own. And I think spending more time on my own has really made me question, why do I get this FOMO feeling? What is it about FOMO that we all find so hard? Is it a feeling of not being wanted? Is it a feeling of not being needed? Is it a feeling of not feeling valued? Like, what is that FOMO feeling? Am I craving being included so much more? And I'm wondering if this is to do with, I have left my job. And so a big part of your identity is your work. You work for the majority of your life, you work for 40 hours a week. And so when that's gone, it's really questioning, who are you? And so a lot of who you are is then the people you're surrounding with. And so you're wanting to be valued by the people that you're surrounding with even more. But it's not that you're not being valued by them, it's just that you have more free time than them at the moment. And so it's getting that, being comfortable again with spending a lot of time in my own company. And, like, I'll be honest, like, I've found it hard. I found myself feeling a lot more insecure recently about just everything, about the podcast, about, you know, what am I doing with my life, about the clothes that I'm wearing, just like really silly little things, which I know I don't actually like. I'm so proud of the podcast. I'm proud of how much it's grown. I like the clothes I wear. I like myself. Like all of these things. I know it's not that really, but it's the fact that I'm spending so much more time on my own that I'm really starting to question these things, because you have so much more time to think. And that's, it's a bit tricky at points, because it's just made me feel quite lonely. And feeling lonely is such like a awful feeling, and it's not a dramatic, like, I'm fine. Okay, it's normal to feel lonely at parts in our life. When you're spending more time on your own, the reality is you're probably going to feel a bit more lonely, because you're not used to having that amount of like social interaction. You're used to having more, and so you feel it more intensely. It's not a big or bad thing, but I just wanted to chat about getting through that lonely feeling a little bit, because when I was at university, I remember first going to uni and really struggling with that lonely feeling, feeling quite isolated, not used to having so much time on my hands, not used to really, being able to dictate my day, not having, I think, especially when you come from a family, like my sisters were always there. There was always someone in the house to chat to, and there was always noise and always things going on. And so not having that and then being at university meant that I felt really lonely when I started. And I know a lot of people talk about it, but I don't think we talk about how we get ourselves through it and how you become unlonely. Like the unlonely diaries. We talk a lot about doing things on our own, but we don't talk about the realities as whilst you're doing those things on your own. It's not that you don't enjoy them, but you can still feel a little bit lonely whilst doing it. And it's okay. It's not a big bad thing, and it's not terrible to feel lonely. It's all right. You'll get through it. I know it's a period that will end, and I know it'll end sooner than I think, and I know it could just be a today thing. I know tomorrow I can spend more time on my own and feel absolutely fine. But I think the thing with loneliness is that it really makes you reflect a lot about who you are as a person. No matter how confident we are, we're always comparing ourselves to the people around us. We're always comparing ourselves to strangers we see on the street. We're constantly comparing, because I think that's how we tend to establish where we're at. If we can compare ourselves to another person, then we're thinking, okay, well, I think they're like, it's kind of, we're constantly thinking in this way where we're comparing ourselves to the people around us, which then can amplify that feeling of loneliness, or the feeling of not feeling good enough, because you're constantly seeing things that other people have that you don't have, but you don't know the feeling that they're having when they're having those things. And so you don't know that they're hanging out with their friends and they're still not feeling lonely at points. We just think we're the only one feeling the emotion, because I think loneliness is such an isolating feeling, and it really makes you feel like you're just the odd one out and that you don't have anything. And I think it makes you retreat and retreat and retreat. And that is the danger of loneliness, is that it makes you more empowered to do stuff on your own, but you, in a way, then become just empowered to do only stuff on your own because you're scared of letting someone else in because you're scared of feeling lonely again. You know, it's like a vicious, vicious cycle. And so at the moment, like, I'm feeling a little bit lonely. And I think that's come up today because, I had the job interview yesterday and that was something that I was working towards. And now that's finished, I'm kind of a bit again at a loss of like, okay, well, what am I working to? What do I want? What am I doing? Where am I going? What is my purpose? What, like, all of these things that, working gives you. I'm kind of just trying to work out what that is. And I think I haven't had as much of a structured approach to the podcast this week. I've been a bit more, I've been busy. I've had other plans and that's been really lovely. But that lack of structure has made me spend too much time thinking about things that I don't really need to think about that deeply. And it's really made me see how when we're feeling lonely and isolated, providing ourselves that structure. And I know I just said about how loneliness can breed isolation because you're scared of feeling lonely again, but I think giving yourself a structure even when you don't have plans with other people can be really helpful at giving you that sense of purpose and reminding yourself that you have things to do, that you are busy. Keeping your mind busy and occupied, I think, is the best way to deal with feeling a bit lonely. And I think that's probably why it's come up now, is because I don't feel super busy and occupied, and that's then making me feel more FOMO about the people that I have around me. Not, and so if you're also struggling with loneliness, which I think so many of us are, and you can feel lonely in a moment, you don't have to be feeling lonely every single day of every single week. It's not, it doesn't always have to be a long-term thing. You can have a lonely day, you can have a lonely hour, you can have a moment where you just think, oh, what am I doing? I don't really know, where you just feel a bit unsure. I would really remind yourself, especially where you do have those free days, and I remember them at university where I wasn't really sure what I was meant to be doing. Give yourself a structure. We like routine, and in that routine, you don't have to be incredibly strict. Just give yourself a brief timetable of a run of events, of things that you're going to take yourself through the day so that you know and you give yourself that sense of purpose. And that's something that I had last week and felt really fine and calm, and didn't have this week, and felt a bit all over the place and a bit unsure and a bit like I was just kind of floating and not really knowing where I was going, just feeling a bit all over the place. And I think that's surfaced now in a feeling of like, what am I doing? Where's my direction? What's my plan? Like, in all of these deeper things. But loneliness is a tricky feeling because no matter how many people you have surrounding you, you can still feel lonely. And I think that's the hardest thing to grasp, especially if you're close with someone who is feeling lonely, or if you're feeling lonely and you have the people around you. Sometimes you can just feel isolated from them because you're comparing yourself to them and you just feel a bit different. You feel like you're not on the same path. And it creates this wedge between you. And I think as soon as you have a wedge between you and someone you're close with, you instantly start becoming more lonely. You instantly start, it's like, I imagine, like, you have these borders around your personality, and the walls start coming down because you're comparing yourself. You're not feeling good enough. You think you need to protect yourself. So you close the wall down. But then by pulling away, you become more lonely and isolated. And it's all of these things. And so what's also been really helpful, especially today, is kind of thinking like, what about me in my inner child? Why am I feeling lonely? What is it? Do I not feel valued? Do I not feel like I have a purpose? Do I not feel, connected at the moment? What is it? Do I feel isolated? Do I not feel like what is it about kid me that this is resurfacing? Like, what is that biggest fear? Because I think, that feeling of loneliness, when you think back to all of the moments that I've felt it and all the moments that you felt it, there will be key standout points and they will be connected. It's just taking a moment to think about how they are connected, and also thinking about the image that you associate it when you're a child. Like, why do you associate that image? I really see myself. It's like I'm like a 4-year-old kid being left at school on my own, and it's like I don't have anyone surrounding me, and I'm kind of looking around. I'm not really sure where to go. I'm not really sure what to do. Like, that's the image that I associate with the inner child in me when I'm feeling like this. And so, what's also been really helpful, apart from giving myself a structure of how to go on with everything, has been thinking, what would help her in this moment? How can I be compassionate to her? Because I think in those moments where you're feeling lonely, it's really easy to berate yourself for thinking, well, why don't you have these people? Why aren't you surrounded with friends? Why don't you have all these plans? Why are you not content with doing a few activities on your own? Why are you filled with like this FOMO because everyone around you is doing these things, but you're not doing them, and that's okay because you don't actually want to do it. It's like this constant FOMO and jealousy. Why? Why? And I berate it and over when the reality is like, if you're just a bit kinder to yourself and you say, you know, it's all right that you're feeling like this. It's okay. It's fine. You're not the only one. Everyone feels a little bit lonely at times. It's just part of working out who you are. Because it's in those moments where your brain is quiet, in those moments where it's not filled with different things going on, it's not filled with noise, that you can actually think and consider, who do I want to be? What's going on in this brain of mine? What life do I want to create? How do I want to exist? You know, all of these things about yourself you get to learn when you are just on your own. And so, in a way, I think being lonely for moments can be a positive thing. And you can turn it into a positive thing. And you can turn it into a period where you do get to know yourself. But it's easier said than done. And it's something that I'm kind of like struggling a little bit with at the moment. I find myself spending time on my own and then constantly just searching for connection elsewhere. You know, I'll be on my phone, I'll be on social media, I'll be on, you know, all of these other things, rather than just sitting with my own feelings and sitting with that uncomfortableness. And knowing that about yourself is like the first step to make sure that you just start sitting with it, because you realize it's not as bad as you think it could be. So I think so much about feeling lonely and feeling isolated is the fear of what the feeling could feel like. It's the fear of thinking, oh, maybe I am on my own. Because the idea of being alone as humans, we're so interconnected, like that's terrifying. But as soon as you face the fear, as soon as you sit with the fear, as soon as you think, this isn't that bad, again, you're being that compassionate person to your younger child, just sitting with them and you're saying, you know what, this feeling that you're feeling right now, and it feels overwhelming, it feels all consuming, it's not as horrific as you think it's going to be. We're going to sit in this lonely feeling and we're not going to try and run from it. And in sitting in it and kind of facing it up front, I think it allows you to move through it. Because I think in a way, maybe I've been kind of hiding from it a little bit. Maybe I've been running, and not in a dramatic way, but just in a not really wanting to say out loud like I am. Like this period of not having a job and of searching for my next thing and of working out what I want to do next, it's making me spend more time on my own than I have done in a while. And it's brilliant and lovely to have so much time and like great, but also it gives you so much more time to think. And that's like, you know, it's making sure that you're allowing yourself the space in that time where you have more time to think, to actually just sit with yourself. And I think so much about becoming older, becoming more comfortable in our own skin, becoming more, you know, just confident in who we are, is learning to sit with the feelings that we have, learning not to let them take over, learning to let them be a part of us, but not all of us. Learning that a feeling doesn't always mean a truth. Learning how to sit with the idea that, okay, maybe I feel a bit lonely right now, and maybe I feel a little bit jealous that they're doing that, and maybe I have FOMO about those things, but that's okay. It's okay that I feel that way. It's not the end of the world. The reason I feel like that is because I'm craving validation from something else. You know, I want someone else to say, like, I want you there. Because at the moment, that's what I'm not feeling like I have. But I do have that. These are the facts where I have that. These are the friends I have surrounding me. You know, like logically reasoning with yourself. Because you do have those things. Loneliness can just make us go into a moment where we think we have nothing, but actually we have so much more than we think. Because as soon as those walls come down, it's so hard to see what is actually there. It's really easy to like, you know, lean into that feeling of that like little bit of a tight chestedness and think, oh, this, you know, it's like a rocky path. The ice is about to break. Like, oh, all of these things are about to come crashing down. I'm on edge. I feel a little bit lonely. I'm on edge. Whereas actually, that feeling of being a little bit lonely, that feeling of anxiousness and tightness in your chest and like everything is going to come crashing down, doesn't mean that everyone around you is going to come crashing down. It doesn't mean you're not connected. It doesn't mean you don't have lovely friends who love you. It doesn't mean you don't have a community of people who are looking out for you. Probably just means you're having to spend more time on your own than you used to. And that's okay. It's okay to find that feeling of spending more time on your own than you're used to a bit trickier than everyone lets on. Everyone talks so much about being so comfortable spending time on their own, but we don't talk about how it's actually, you know, it's hard. Everyone else seems to have everyone. And sometimes I'm sat here like, am I Billy No Mates? Like, what is this? And I know that's not the case. I know that's not the case because I know I have lovely friends and a very full life. And so I know that's not the case. That's just me listening to an emotion and feeling it's a truth and listening to it and letting it inform my actions and letting it become more isolated, more isolated, more isolated until I isolate myself so much that I can make that into a truth. And so I guess what I want you to take from this episode is that it's all right to struggle with being alone when you haven't struggled with it before, when you're used to spending time on your own, when you're used to doing things on your own, especially when you've gone through a change, because usually that change will mean you're spending more time in your own head and you're thinking about other things, and it means you're considering a bigger picture. And that feeling of loneliness can feel incredibly isolating and like all the walls are down around you. But remember that sometimes you just need to zoom out and think of yourself like the center of a spider web and think about all of the strands that are coming off you that connect you to other people. And as soon as you zoom out and you start thinking about who am I connected to? What strands do I have? You'll realize you have more than you think. You actually have quite a few. You actually have a lot. You actually have a community of people supporting you and loving you. And I think one other thing about loneliness is that it's linked to your confidence about who you are. It's linked to how confident you feel about yourself. It's linked to how confident you feel about yourself, because often when we feel lonely and we're questioning whether someone wants to be with us, we're questioning whether people like us, it's because we don't have the confidence in our own, personality and who we are. And it's something that, it's why believing in yourself and having that self-courage and, determination to stand up tall, hold your head up high and say, I deserve to be here is so important. Because when you don't, again, it leads to these feelings of loneliness. It leads to these feelings of feeling like you don't deserve to be here, really second guessing everything around you. And so this is the other part that I really want to remind you of, like, you deserve to be here. You deserve to be confident in yourself. You've achieved good things. You're going to achieve great things. You deserve to take up space. It's just so important that you realize it, because this is the other side of loneliness, is that it's going to knock your self-confidence, and it's this very vicious cycle. You have low self-confidence, you isolate yourself from more people because you're scared of feeling more lonely. You lower your self-confidence, getting like, it's all like this. Whereas instead, we're going to hold our head up high. We're going to stand on our own 2 feet. We're going to take up the space that we deserve to take up. And we're going to realize that we're just spending time on our own. We're not lonely. We're just spending time on our own. It's very different. It doesn't mean something more dramatic than the fact of like the people that you love are busy. It's nothing more than that. And then your confidence encourages, because you go and you have a coffee on your own and you do something nice and you realize you've had a good day and you realize you've entertained yourself and you realize your own company isn't as bad as you thought it was. Then you feel a little bit less lonely because you've given yourself purpose that day. You've made yourself feel like you've had a good day. You've made yourself feel like you've accomplished something. It just goes round and round and round till all of a sudden you realise you've created a full life for yourself, and that feeling of loneliness has kind of gone a little bit. And it's not to say it's never going to come up again, and it's not to say it's not allowed to come up again, because, when we have new scenarios, these feelings, these little niggles that we have, they can come up again. It's come up again for me, but it's just reminding myself who I am. Standing tall and looking in my mirror that's over there and being like, you know what, I think I'm good. I'm happy with the person that I am. I'm not constantly chasing validation from the people around me, because I validate myself. It's giving that power back to you that's really important. But anyway, as I was saying, I just want you to be compassionate to yourself and kind to yourself, and just imagine that version of you as a 5-year-old self and think, what would I do to help them if they were feeling a little bit lonely? If they were feeling a little bit on their own? I think the biggest thing to do would just be kind. Because it will pass. And this feeling of loneliness will pass. And this feeling of uncertainty will pass. But it's learning to sit with it until it does. Because I think when we're filling our lives with things, we often don't get to feel the experiences that we're actually feeling deep down, because we're kind of covering them up. And when you're feeling on your own, sometimes it brings those things up, which means you do have to consider them more. But by considering more, you're more likely to work through them. And I think sometimes, like for me, facing this feeling of fear of being on my own head on is what needs to happen, because it's not something that's terrible and scary. Being on your own is not something awful. Spending time in your own company is not something awful. You don't always need to search for interaction with other people. Like, you are enough on your own. And I know we know that, and that's not really the point of this episode. I know those things. The point of this episode is to let you know you can know those things and still feel lonely. Because it's not always about not having a good relationship with yourself, but more about craving more connection with others. You know you have that good relationship with yourself, but it's all right to want to spend more time with other people. That's okay. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something to think you can just will away by doing so many things on your own. Sometimes I think it's an important thing to listen to and just sit with, because it's very easy to hide how we truly feel about something. And so if you're also feeling like this, remember, firstly, give yourself that structured plan, the day-to-day list. Work out how you're going to spend your time. Give yourself that structure, the list of things you would like to complete. And it doesn't have to be massively structured. Just give yourself that sense of direction. Give yourself that sense of order. You will feel so much better knowing that you have quite a steady plan. Secondly, allow yourself to sit with the moment. Allow yourself to sit with the uncomfortable feeling and see what it brings up. Because sometimes when we face things head on, it means we can actually face them and move on. And that would be brilliant. Finally, think about what the inner child in you really wants. Because I promise you, listening to that and being compassionate and doing the things that will make them happy will make you happier than you think. Because that emotion that you're feeling, that tight chestedness that you're feeling, it doesn't always mean it's a truth. It doesn't mean it's a fact. I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes, seeing our emotions as facts can make us believe a narrative that isn't necessarily true. And so be kind to yourself. Be very compassionate. And remember, if you're enjoying this podcast episode, share it with someone who you think could also benefit, because being lonely is one of the worst feelings in the world, and it's very hard to get yourself out of. But it's something that, I felt a bit vulnerable saying it, because it's not something we really like talking about, admitting that you feel a bit lonely. But it's okay to admit it, and it's absolutely fine. It doesn't mean anything bad about you. It just means you're going through a period of time where you're not seeing as many people, and that's okay. That's okay. But anyway, on to the question part of this week's podcast. So the first question on this week's podcast, I'm only going to be able to do two, because I have slightly run out of time, because my friend gets here in 1 hour and I need to do a rapid tidy of the flat. First question is, how do you get more comfortable spending your time on your own? Which is, a very perfect question for this podcast. And I think the message that I want to share for this week's podcast is that, you can get more comfortable spending your time on your own, but you might then become uncomfortable again. You might become more and it's it's not something you can fix sometimes, that feeling of being really comfortable on your own forever, because I think you're placed in new environments, you're placed in new surroundings, and that then makes you feel a little bit lonely and isolated again. And so I think what's really important is finding the things that can bring you back and ground you in those moments where you are feeling a little bit lonely, where you are feeling a little bit on your own, where you are feeling uncomfortable with spending time on your own. And so a big thing I would say for this one is find your routine, find your structure, find your kind of giving yourself purpose. And I think through giving yourself purpose, through giving yourself that space and direction, you find your things that ground you. And by finding the things that ground you, I think we become less kind of all consumed with this feeling of being lonely and spending time on our own. Because actually going through the motions of doing the things we enjoy doing is absolutely fine. It's more the notion that we're doing it on our own, and is there something wrong, and why don't we have people surrounding us, and why are we on our blah 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 blah, It's that's the thing. Because you like going for a coffee, and you like going to the cinema, and you like doing your work, and I like creating content. I like doing all of these things. But it's when I start overthinking the fact that I'm doing it on my own and not everyone's doing it on their own, that's when it becomes an issue. It's when I think too much about all the things I'm doing rather than just thinking of it as an action, not thinking that there's so much context to it, not thinking that there's so much context behind it, just thinking of this is it, this is fine, I'm just doing my thing, just doing my thing. And as soon as you become more comfortable with that, I think that feeling of fear of spending time on your own goes. And so I'd give yourself a structure. Give yourself a plan, give yourself an action. Say, I'm going to go for a coffee on my own. I'm going to do this on your own. I think A, exposure therapy makes you more comfortable spending time on your own. But B, it also lets you find those pillars of things you enjoy doing on your own that make you feel confident spending time on your own, that build you back up. Because the thing about feeling lonely is it knocks your confidence. And this is also what I want to mention. It knocks your confidence. And it makes you overthink so many other things. And so you need to get back on that confidence step, okay? Remember who you are. You need to remember, the life that you want to have, the life that you do have, the things you have surrounding yourselves. You need to hold your head up high. Remember, this is good. I'm okay. Spending time on my own isn't the dramatic ending of all things. I know it's not a bigger sign of something more concerning. It's just the fact that the people I love are busy. Like it's not that deep. And making sure that you take the emotion out of spending time alone is important. And I'm not saying you can't feel the emotion, but just to how to proactively kind of get on with spending time on your own so you can enjoy it more. For me, the most important thing has been taking the emotion out of it, and maybe that'll help you too. Okay, next question. How do you become more confident? And I think this is a really nice question to end this episode on, because I think a lot about feeling a little bit lonely, a little bit, disconnected, I guess, is confidence. Like I said in the last question, it's about, you know, being confident to spend time on your own, knowing that it's okay to spend time on your own. Knowing that you are a worthy person of value that brings something to a relationship, a friendship. It's having that confidence within yourself. And often when we're feeling lonely, I think it's it's related to the confidence we feel we have in ourselves. And so this is, I know I mentioned this before in the episode, but this is a good question for this episode. And I think we become more confident when we become less obsessed with how we think other people perceive us. When we realise that the only opinion that truly matters is our own. That the people around us love us. When we stop second guessing, when we stop thinking that things are more dramatic, or people, when we stop second guessing the reality of a situation, accept it for what it is. Your friends like you because they are your friends. Your partner loves you because they are your partner. Like, they don't have to do these things. They're not doing them by force. They're doing them out of choice because they love you. And so we become more confident when we take the power away so much from the other person. We start thinking, you know what? Yeah, I am a good person. I'm actually a great person. I'm really cool. I'm really funny. I make people laugh. I make people feel seen, And I like me. I like the way I act. I like the person I am. And I like spending time in my own company. And I'm okay with who I am. And by taking that power away from them, you boost your own power. You boost your own confidence. And you say, you know what? Even if they don't see it, what does it matter? Because I see it. I see it in myself that, I deserve to be confident. I deserve to hold my head up high. And it's having that pride in yourself that makes you into a confident person. And so if you are feeling a little bit unconfident at the moment, what I would say was practice holding your head up high. Okay? Look people in the eye when they're talking to you. Give yourself the confidence and the encouragement to take up the space you deserve to take up. I'm not saying be obnoxious, and I'm not saying be arrogant. I'm saying you deserve to be in that room that you're in just as much as everyone else in that room deserves it. So, stand up tall and put your shoulders back. Have that little bit in belief in yourself, because the reason you're in that room is because someone else believed in you too. So anyway, thank you for listening to this week's episode of the podcast. Make sure you're following me at Mail from Bella on Instagram and on TikTok and on YouTube. And if you haven't already, share this episode with someone who you think could benefit from a bit of a vulnerable talk about feeling a little bit lonely, because something that we all deal with, and it's something that we don't talk about. I feel like people treat loneliness and feeling a little bit isolated as like a one-time experience. You just get over it, and then you learn to love spending time on your own, and then it goes. Because I do like spending time on my own. I do have lovely things that I do, and I have lovely people surrounding me. But sometimes I take a step. Sometimes I take 2 steps back, and that's okay. It's nothing to beat yourself up about. It's just the reality of change and experiencing a new scenario. So anyway, I'll speak to you again next week. I love you. Bye.